to Metro Talk. I'm Kent Shuffle. Thanks for being with us. Pat Gowan's alongside. Pat's one of the editors with the Post-Dispatch. Welcome, sir.
I can't.
And Jim Schrader's here. Jim's the publisher of the Telegraph. Welcome, Jim.
Hi, guys.
Jim, the Madison County Republican Central Committee has adopted a resolution that calls for county officials to move forward with solving the tax debt sale without indulging in a blame game. They say it's time for politics to end. Will that happen? Will all this get resolved in Madison County regarding the tax sale without pointing fingers?
Well, let's see. You said that was the Republican Central Committee that adopted that resolution. And last I checked, the vast majority of office holders in Madison County are Democrats. So I wouldn't exactly call this a binding resolution. There are many that are saying that the reason this tax sale is called to question now is because the highest ranking Republican office holder in Madison County politics happens to be a Republican, Kurt Prenzler, and that would be the reason that the Central Committee wants this solved without politics, which would make sense. Is it going to be solved without politics and blame game? No, it's not. As we always say on this show, you know, there's an election coming up. It may be 1 year or 4 years or 3 years, but there's an election coming up. The Democrats would like nothing better than to reseat a Democratic treasurer and unseat Republican Prenzler. So while they may play nice for a little while and try to work this out and try to work out some of the missteps that were handled probably from both sides. It's not going to be done without some finger pointing either now or later. There will be a time as we get closer to re-election for Kurt Prenzler that the blame game, if it's laid aside right now, will resurrect itself and there will be lots of blame pointed around. I'm not sure that we're going to resolve anything right now without lots of blame being laid. Auditor Rick Fasten continues to be pretty vocal on this situation. I understand from our reporter that some of the Finance Committee meetings get pretty heated, shall we say, with allegations flying back and forth. Whether or not this tax sale is going to result in penalties, worst case scenario may even have to be redone, heaven forbid, because some paperwork wasn't filed by, depending on who you believe, either by Kurt Prenzler's office or Madison County Attorney's Tom Gibbons' office. It's not going to be done without blame.
Pat, the Republican Central Committee has adopted a resolution that says stop the blame game on the tax sale issue in Madison County. Can it end without finger pointing?
Well, what a reliable engine of news the Treasurer's Office in Madison County has become. It didn't used to be like that. It was a quiet little office. It held money. It invested money, went about its business, and then all of a sudden it erupted. We start off with revelations that Fred Bathon, the Democrat, when he was treasurer, though this didn't come out until later, that his people had run sales of tax delinquent property that may not have been fair at all. And there's some significant indication that they weren't fair. And that appears to be the subject of an FBI investigation that's going on now. And the Republicans looked at the Democrats who backed Bathon and said, aha. Then Kurt Prenzler gets to be the treasurer. He fires two of Bathon's former top people and cancels a long-term investment that maybe was outside the parameters of what the office should do, maybe not. He said that it violated the rules of Bathon's office. Bathon's people said, we created the rules and created the rules with exceptions. So he looked at the Democrats and said, aha. The Democrats looked back and said, well, maybe you just canceled the investment as a reason to justify the firing of the Democrats from your office. So they gave him a big aha, along with the idea that if these investments, by being canceled early by him, cost the county a large amount of interest, and the Democrats are ahaing the potential loss of a lot of money that these investments otherwise would have garnered, and the Democrats insist those investments were fair. We're just blowing away the smoke from all of that when along comes this. They have a tax sale this year, but without the proper judge's signature on a document to authorize the tax sale. Whose fault is that? Well, the Democrats say it's your fault, the Republican treasurer. Aha. The Republicans say, wait a minute, the law says the state's attorney's supposed to do it. Aha. State's attorney, the Democrat says, no, we've never done that. It's always been on you. That's the issue right now where the Republicans are saying, well, let's call it truce. There's not going to be a truce. This is very contentious. Republicans have 2 offices in Madison County when they've rarely held one. The Democrats, I'm sure, are afraid that this may signal some real shift in the politics of Madison County. The Republicans are going to be desperate to hold that position and to gain others. There's no way to not politicize this. And I'm guessing the Republican committee figures that they can do that in this narrow instance, because you can argue that the blame on this either falls with Prenzler, the Republican, or with Gibbons, the Democrat state's attorney, each pointing the finger at the other. So maybe they figure there's enough blame to quiet this one down, but it won't be. They'll each be blaming each other by election time.
If they continue pointing the fingers, is there a downside for the electorate?
Well, I'll give it this. I watched so many elections in which there is finger pointing and name calling over nothing. At least there are underlying substantive issues at work here. There is money to be lost if they've got to refund the tax distributions to redo the tax sale. There's money that will be lost if they have to redo the tax sale. There's money that may be lost from the investments. At least these are substantive issues that are delineated by who of which party was in office at the time it happened. So some reasonable airing of this probably is to the taxpayers' benefit. I imagine they'll all get beat over the head with it to the point that we may not recognize it for what it is, but at least there's an underlying issue in this one.
And I suppose a potential for lawsuits from those buyers of those delinquent taxes saying, hey, wait a minute, we did this in good faith. You people are the ones that screwed up. Why should we lose out?
And it's going to be a test of how far a minor technicality can go. No one's questioning that all you had to do is give a judge the form and the judge would sign it and everything would be legal. But the failure to do that is unraveling an enormous amount of problem on the treasurer's office and the rest of the county that could be very expensive. When you think in the older days, somebody would have winked and nodded and slipped the judge, and that would have been that, and it wouldn't have been right and it wouldn't have been legal. But no one's arguing that anything is really wrong with this tax sale this time, except for the fact it doesn't have a signature that no one's questioning it could have had. So it's going to be a lot of turmoil over a very tiny aspect of the sale.
We need to take a break. We've got more Metro Talk in just a moment.
Hello and welcome to the Lewis and Clark Minute. Today we're going to check out the music program with Dr. Teresa Crane.
Have you always wanted to learn how to play the piano? Maybe you wanted to learn Beethoven's Für Elise. Or maybe you like a more popular style like Jim Brickman. Or maybe you like jazzy blues. You can learn all this and more right here at Lewis and Clark Community College.
This has been your Lewis and Clark Minute.
When you open a book, you can explore new lands, make new friends, and discover new adventures. There are amazing possibilities when you open your mind to reading. Explore new worlds. Read.
60-inch screen, high definition. Football season is coming up. You can watch it right here. What do you think?
I'll take it.
Huh? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
You're right. I don't need it.
You're watching Metro Talk. I'm Kent Scheffel. Jim Schrader and Pat Gowan are here. Pat, union employees who work for the state have experienced a setback in their efforts to get a pay increase. They were supposed to get an increase. Governor Quinn says you can't have that money because the legislature didn't allocate that money in the budget. An arbitrator went with the workers, but now a judge has said, wait a minute, the arbitrator failed to look at Governor Quinn's suggestion that the money was not properly allocated. Are the employees going to get this money in the end?
Well, it's more complicated than this because some of them already have. We tend to think of the state as a single monolithic thing, and there is a state and there are state employees and they're all treated the same, but they're not. In this case, the contract, which was originally signed by Governor Blagojevich, remember him way back when, 2008, gave effectively 5% pay raises to these people, staggered over a short period of time, that those increases would take effect in the past year or so. Yes, there was an arbitration, and the contract was modified with the agreement of AFSCME and Quinn a couple times in the interim, but it came to the most recent raises. They say the contract says we get the raises. It went to an arbitrator. He said, yes, they do. Quinn says, wait, you forgot the fact that the legislature didn't appropriate any money. I cannot spend money that does not exist. And the judge said, well, with that in mind, it goes back to the arbitrator. We need you to take this into account. But it's not one big pot of money, and they don't all work for the same agency. And what happened was, if you were covered by the contract and you worked for an agency that had enough money to make it through the end of the fiscal year with the raises, you got the raises. If you worked for an agency that did not have, in the view of the governor, enough money to make it through the fiscal year with the raises, then you didn't get the raises. So about 30,000 people got left out, and I put this in my notes somewhere, about 12,000, I think 12 or 13,000 did get the raises. So it isn't even fair across the board to everybody. It's just a question of the budget health of the agency for which you worked, or how well it was stocked, I guess would be a better word. I'm in Illinois and I tend to think of stash, how well it was stocked with money from the legislature. And of course, Quinn has no control over that, which gets to be sort of another question that we've batted around from time to time, is whether the legislature ought to sign off on contracts, because the governor signs off on a contract promising to do something requiring an appropriation by the legislature, which is not bound by that contract to appropriate the money. What is the governor to do? And that's what's come to roost here.
For all of those that haven't taken the Constitution in a few years, you remember the three branches of government, the judicial, the legislative, and the executive. All three are in play here. You have a former governor who is now cooling his heels in a 6x12 cell somewhere, saying, carte blanche, you guys got this coming. You know, hang around long enough, you're going to get this 5% raise across the board. Got the legislative branch saying, well, that was then, this is now. We don't have the money right now, so sorry, you know, sucks to be you, but we don't have the money for that. The governor, the executive branch, saying, well, sorry, that was then, this is now. You heard what the legislature said. We don't have the money, you can't have the raise. Then the judicial branch comes in and says, well, wait a minute. These people were promised this. It's in the contract. Contracts are binding by law. Therefore, you have to give it to them. We go back to the governor who says, yeah, but see how we've come around and round here. So now we've got all three sides in kind of a stalemate, and left over here is this group of workers, state workers, that in their mind were promised things in due time, in the good faith and the strength and the honor of the Illinois state government, and now they're not getting what they were told. It's not uncommon when you come down to it, sometimes in private industry, where union workers think something is going to happen, and then they find out that the plant's closing, for example, and all of a sudden their contract is no good anymore. Ultimately, I suspect that these folks are going to get raises, though I don't know where the money is going to come from. You can't exactly take monies back from people that have already collected them and said, you know, sorry, you had that for 3 months or 5 months or 6 months, we're going to take it back, because the rest of your brethren out there didn't get it. So on the good faith for those employees, I can see where they expect it, and I can see where in many cases they probably deserve it. Not in all, but in some cases they deserve it. I just don't know where the money's going to come from. We continue to dig ourselves deeper in a hole in the state of Illinois. It is great to say we're going to spend money on this, that, or the other, but when it comes time to sign the check or to write the check, we don't have the money. And there's all kinds of things going on in the state right now that were implied would happen or promised would happen somewhere down the road, including completing highways and finishing road projects and so forth that aren't happening because the state is not only broke, the state is in a hole real deep.
The court told the arbitrator to find out whether there really is enough money there to pay the raises. Now, how he's going to determine that's a good question. I don't know. Does he usurp the governor's authority then to run the agencies as he sees fit? Does someone ask the legislature, when you appropriated the money for the agency that you did you intend that to include the raise that was negotiated in the contract? What kind of sleight of hand has been at work here? The arbitrator's got a really difficult job in this case, and this story is going to get stranger before it makes sense.
We need to take another break. We have more Metro Talk after this.
Hello and welcome to the Lewis and Clark Minute. Today we're going to check out the radio broadcasting program in WLCA with Mike Lemons.
Have you ever listened to your favorite radio station or your favorite disc jockey and say, you know, I could do that? Or maybe you're the type of person who says, I could never do something like that. Well, with the help of first-year Mass Comm student John, we're going to show you just how easy it is. Each voice intro starts with talking about the band that just played, and we add a station identifier. Next, you want to offer some information that may be of interest to your audience. And finally, tell the listeners what the next song is, who sings it, followed by another station identifier. John will do one live now.
Silver Sun Pickup Substitution on WLCA. The Big Pink released their debut album called A Brief History of Love. The single is off that album. It's The Big Pink with Dominoes. It's on College Radio's Best 89.9.
This has been your Lewis and Clark Minute.
What's that? I don't know. Something I kind of made. Ooh, what's it do?
What do I do? Well, thanks for asking. I ring my bell and I like to dance. What do I do? Well, thanks for asking.
Ow! Yeah, it still needs a little work.
Anything's possible. Keep thinking. Get started on your own inventions or just play some games at inventnow.org.
Sounds like you could use some Van Gogurt. It's fortified with arch-rich nutrients to improve your math and reading skills. Catch!
Van Gogurt. Thanks. So what's the deal with your ear?
Always with the ear, huh?
Feed your kids the arts. For 10 simple ways to learn how, visit AmericansForTheArts.org.
This is Metro Talk. Jim Schrader and Pat Gowan are here. I'm Kent Scheffel. Jim, State Treasurer Dan Rutherford says Governor Quinn is wrong in closing 2 of Illinois' prisons. Rutherford says the prison system's already at 147% of capacity and that closing the prisons at Dwight and at Tams is a public safety issue. Is he correct?
Sure is. You've got right now in excess of 48,000 people incarcerated in the state of Illinois, down from about 49,000 in January of last year, in a system that was built to house 33,000 inmates. And that's with those 3 facilities remaining open. It's designed for 33,000 and is housing 48,000 plus. You close those 3 facilities, let's just use raw numbers for right now, you haven't reduced the population, but you've reduced the housing by a certain number of beds. So now it's not designed for 33,000 inmates anymore. Let's just make up a number and say, okay, it's now designed for 25,000. Well, take 8,000 beds out. So now we're not 47% overcrowded, we're 62% overcrowded, so we haven't accomplished anything. It's back to the question we talked about in the last segment. The right thing to do would be to go ahead and give those people the raises that they were promised. The right thing to do would be to keep these prisons open, continue to operate them, even at the increased capacity, but certainly not diminishing the capacity and increasing the overcrowding. The question remains, where does the money come from? And Treasurer Rutherford should know better than anybody that the money is not there. Is it the right thing, especially for these small communities, to close these facilities? No. I mean, it's the bread and butter for the TAMS area. This facility employs thousands of people that count on that facility for their jobs. There are thousands of inmates housed in these facilities, and I don't know where you're going to move them to. It's not like you can just say just arbitrarily, well, you guys get a free pass. I think the TAMS, if I remember, is kind of known as, this is where we send the troublemakers. The worst are the ones that end up at TAMS. The money's not there. The money's not there for the raises that we talked about before. How many years have we been talking about this on this program? You know, you're going to have to increase revenue somewhere to do all of the things that everyone thinks is necessary. I don't like the idea potentially of turning loose however many inmates it would take just by rearranging things to balance out for these three facilities. I personally would rather see them serve out their time and end up their time in jail that they've been sentenced to. But I don't know where we're going to put them if you take that many more beds out of the supply chain without reducing, you know, the demand on facilities, and I don't see that happening unless you just go to early release programs, and we all know how well that has worked out for the state.
Pat, Governor Quinn, or Treasurer Rutherford says Governor Quinn is wrong in closing a couple of prisons in the state. Is that correct?
Well, you're going to see exactly what you said. You're going to see early releases. We had a false start with it a while back with that so-called MGT push system, which didn't work very well. And smoke had to die from that, but now that the dust is settled, you're going to see them do this again. And maybe with better parameters, you've got to relieve the burden somehow. The governor's point with TAMS is that the Supermax concept is sort of passing, the time is passing it by. It's fraught with so much angst, so much litigation, and it is so expensive. It's about 3 times more expensive per inmate to run TAMS than other prisons. So I think a combination of early release and realignment of the prisons is what the governor has in mind. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. About 2/3 of the people in Illinois live north of Interstate 80, but 2/3 of the prisons are not north of Interstate 80. They're all over the state, which is really kind of a pain in the neck for managing the prisons and the prisoners and the visitation. But the reason to do that is because it spreads the economic benefit of the employment and the ancillary supply contracts and so forth across the state. This is a very good issue for Treasurer Rutherford, who is a first-termer. He's a Republican. Nobody knows who the heck he is. He was a state senator and representative previously, but unless you happen to be from his district, you don't know who he is. Couldn't pick his picture out of a lineup. With that in mind, this is an issue that can get him into a lot of communities around the state. Certainly he will be seen as a champion down at TAMS, where that prison is, and Dwight, where the women's prison would close, saying, look, I'm trying to save your jobs, and it sort of appeals to a Republican base in those outlying territories. It gets his name out there, gets some publicity. I'm not saying that's the only reason to do it, and I'm not saying it's all politics, but this is a man who's made it known he is interested in running for governor in the next election, and you've got to see it, you know, in that light. So this is a political issue as well as a practical issue. And his answer for it, by the way, is, well, we need a long-term strategic plan for this. And of course, the problem with a long-term strategic plan right now is you have no way to anticipate where the economy is going to be in any long term or what your revenue is going to be. in any long term. This is like people hanging onto a life preserver after the ship sank, trying to plan the next cruise. It would be a very good thing, but it's probably not practical.
I like the idea that some states have adopted on a small scale. It's not been widespread, but it's private operation of prisons, where you have a private contractor comes in and bids for the services or bids for the contracts to actually operate the prisons. I know it's been done in Ohio and I think Pennsylvania and a couple of other states. And I know that it shouldn't be painted with a brush this broadly, but in most cases, private enterprise operates more efficiently than government when you're talking about operating facilities. In this particular case, possibly a developer could come in and build a huge prison and say to the state, we will operate it on a per capita basis of this. This is what we charge you. You will know exactly how much it will cost you to operate the prison. You don't have to deal with employees and supply line economics anymore. You don't have to deal with food costs. We'll take care of all of that, and you know exactly what to appropriate for your expenses on a monthly basis because we are going to take over operation of the prison.
And politically, you'll pay all those employees less than they got before, and you'll alienate everybody in all the communities that have prisons.
Of course.
Politically.
Exactly. I mean, there's the downside of that. So how do you balance this scale of we need more prison beds because we're sending more people to prison all the time. We don't want to turn the bad guys loose, but the state can't afford to be in the bed and breakfast business of operating prisons.
Are all these discussions necessary before we can start that early release program? Do we have to go through this routine and make the public realize, gee, we just can't afford it before we can go back to early release?
Well, that would be a good thing to do, but there is an election coming up. So, I mean, it's exactly what, as Pat says, this would be political suicide for anybody to even mention that. Not to mention, and the Belleville News Democrat has done an excellent job of the workers' comp costs that some deserved, some maybe not so deserved, of these employees that work in these prisons. I mean, you've got expenses there that are through the roof as well.
That's going to do it for this round of Metro Talk. Thanks for being with us. Jim Schrader, the publisher of the Telegraph, has been here, along with Pat Gowan, one of the editors with the Post-Dispatch. I'm Kent Shuffle. We'll see you next time.